faire ici tout des pères Hank MTUT. The père Hank MTUT is the what we call Academy de la Culture Noire, established in England and operative everywhere where Kamit people are available. Today we're introducing a new topic. This topic comes after the topic we discussed in French, in the French part of the parent MTUT. We talk about the Black Code and the Royal Monarchy on Common. We also talk about under the tutelage and management of the Western Monarchy 1 and 2. So today we're coming back in the English audience to talk about the Black Code, the destruction and the segregation of the Kush Kamit Kongo Monarchy. First of all, I want to thank all the Black community, the Kamit community, the Kush Kamit Kongo community, and we greet all our herders who have been helping us to grow the insight, to grow the awareness of the condition we've been living in. So today we're gonna go deep into this presentation. We are here in the studio with our Ed Eru and Senet Kanefer Ranecherkuchi. And to start, I'm gonna read what the Black Code is. I'm just gonna zap it in the internet, because the most amazing thing and at the same time frightening things of the Black Code is that most of our brothers and sisters don't know what it is. Well, some have heard about it, but never got the time, the focus, or maybe the curiosity to go look into. The Black Code regulates our life, has been regulating our life since, but yet we don't know. It's not that the Black Code has been regulating our life, it's still regulating our life up to date, but most of brothers and sisters merely know about the name. So what is Black Code? You can't go make some research on the internet by yourself. I'm gonna just read to you what is written on Google. So the Black Code was a decree originally passed by France King Louis XIV in 1685. The Black Code governed many blacks in and after harsh slavery, but did not relieve the brutality of the slave master in many areas under the French control. A more deeper research I found on the Code Noir, the Black Code, and another seed said is the Code Noir initially took shape in Louis XIV edict in 1685, although subsequent decree modified a few of the code's provisions. The first document established the main line for the policing of slavery right up to 1789. The very first article expelled all Jews from the colony. Jews play a significant but hardly dominant role in the Dutch colony of the Caribbean region, but were not allowed to hold property or slave in the French colony. The edict also insisted that all slaves be instructed as Catholic and not as Protestant. For the most part, the code concentrated on defining the condition of slavery, passing the condition through the matter, not the father, and establishing harsh control over the conduct of those enslaved. Slaves had virtually no rights, though the code did enjoin master to take care of the sick and the old. The source of this introduction is dit les rois touchant la police des îles des Amériques françaises. So I'm gonna pass the word to our Senate. Can you tell us what's the feeling you had listening to this word?
I think it's quite interesting. I mean, from a legal point of view as well, because having studied law in UK, I studied law in the UK, but I also did Roman law in Italy. Therefore, I saw how what it means to have a rule, what it means to have a law. For many people, we think the laws available are, for example, you know about the health and safety laws, you know about the privacy laws, you know about the laws regarding the computers and the phones and stuff like that. So with early offences regarding phones and the online life, the early offences used to go unpunished simply because there was no laws against them. But equally, in some states, especially in America and between America and the UK, there may be laws that are old, that are still active or in place, but chosen not to be used. Whereas there are also other laws that are against human rights that have been eradicated and changed as human rights laws were enacted all over UK or all over Europe, as well as the common world. Now, to hear the fact of a rule of law that was created during a time where human beings were thought to be things, a time where human beings had no rights, a time where human beings could be sold like you would sell your shoes, like you would sell your phone, and having that kind of law active today, and knowing that that law can be acted upon at any moment is scary, because it means this. It means that we've done a hard work in terms of creating human rights, in terms of changing what was done. But now this law represents something that people don't understand. It represents the fact of one day you could wake up and things could be different and we could go back to square zero. Now the problem is the effort made in order to have human rights and in order to have legality of things, legality of humans, and also equality. And even though it's not acted upon fully, but all those efforts done to arrive to this moment can be undone by laws such as those ones. It means that one day you could wake up and the system could activate those laws. But the problem is the system knows exactly what you did in order to remove the effect of those laws on human lives. Now, in order to combat them, it will be a lot harder, because these laws are in effect up until today. They're not being used, but they are there. They need to be eradicated and they need to be upheld. They need to be removed, but they haven't been removed.
Yeah. Yeah, I will go into that when you say that, when you explain how the mechanic of law goes on. I had an image come in my mind. You know, when you're driving, you have a vertical sign, so like the traffic light, and you also have sign on the ground. I remember that was when I was learning to drive. I've been told that you respect the law on the ground as long as you don't have the law sign up like the traffic lights.
Yes.
You know, so whenever you have the traffic lights, it kind of abrogates the law that you have written on the ground. So human rights, as you've been told, you know, has been promoted by politics. Okay, but when we talk about the Black Code and the regulation taken in the Berlin Conference in 1884 and 1885 was not taken by politicians, but by royals.
Yes, absolutely.
By royals. So when we go into it, by the way the structure of law is made, we can straight away see that the law of politics can't abrogate the law of royals. Then we end up straight away in a sphere where we talk about institutional and discrimination. Institutional discrimination is based on the law, those kind of law made by royals. Whereas we have a space where we can say, okay, we can argue by discrimination or not. But when we look deeply into it, we see that the both law still acting now. When the French come with the universal law of human rights, okay, that's strange because the French has been the French enslaved other people in the world, organize massive kill of people around the world, especially Africa, keep people under colonization for a long time, use mafia tactic on African people and country up to days. So into this equation, okay, it's like say that it's like say Ramon Kota have write a poesy on love of and caring. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to say that the French wrote a law about human rights because they're not respecting it. So my question now, when the French talk about human rights and I say that as black people, who the French consider as human?
Yeah.
Because they're saying one thing and they're acting other way. So from the French perspective, are we all human? I don't think so.
Yeah.
Because French people have seen the black zoo in their country. White people, black people have been exposed in zoo for people to come to look, to pay a ticket. It has been happened a Congolese guy in the 60s in America. A very black Congolese people have been taken to America and put in zoo for people to in America for people to come to see and pay money for it. So that's already that action.
And they were portrayed like you portray an animal. So
yeah.
It's not a case of coming to see the Congolese or the African life, but it's a case of coming to see
an animal.
An animal. So
yeah.
You see the nakedness of the animal, and you see the roughness, and you see the rawness of an animal, and you also see the disempowerment of an animal as well. You see the weakness. So it's transformed to the extent where, and then you understand how that code noir affects the inferiority that it creates, and how it also imposes it into animals as well, because animals were respected around the world, but recently they're not respected anymore, just similarly because, like we say, we have the zoos and things like that. And I think just before you carry on this, I just wanted to quickly come in and point another thing. It's like when a law is enacted, it needs to be abolished or abrogated, like you're saying, but it needs to be abolished formally in terms of this doesn't exist anymore. Then with slavery, what happened is they created the Slavery Act abolishing slavery. Now the problem is, slavery was not just a case of like abolishing slavery, but it was a case of it was something that was lawful at the time, and it was lawful to the extent where there were laws which regulated how slavery operated. There were laws which regulated the sale of human beings, how the women in slavery were led to live, as well as how the families were organized, and also what you're talking about, how the black people were regarded. The thing about the Code Noir that people don't understand is that, yes, it talks about slavery, but in a very few lines. But what really the Code Noir tackles is not enslavement, but it's actually looking at another person as being inferior. And then now the Slavery Act comes and abolishes slavery. It cannot abolish the Code Noir, because the Code Noir doesn't really just specifically talk about slavery. It talks about, for instance, the refusal of interracial marriages, right? Now, by the time the Code Noir is done, by the time the slavery is abolished, what you will see a lot of the interracial marriage were persecuted. They were persecuted, and people were burned to life, people were killed, families were separated, and people were put aside. But when you look at the root cause, what you will see is the people who were perpetrating those acts, those heinous crimes, right? They were not always followed by the law. Why? Because the act in a subconscious level was actually regulated by the Code Noir. Because if the Code Noir forbids interracial couples or marriages, right? And now you're faced with that situation, what happens is that automatically whoever takes act of the law to correct that mistake is not automatically prosecuted
Mhm.
unless the state specifically specifies that this thing cannot go on. So you see, the thing about that, and that's what's interesting about the Code Noir, is that the Code Noir talks about a large issue.
A large issue. A
lot of things, yeah.
One of the things the Black Code talk about is, for example, it regulates the movement of the black people. You know, so as if you take the Black Code, and for example, I just gonna bring down two examples. Back in the 1460, immediately after the decolonization of Africa, we had Marcus Garvey and many Black American activists. Okay, they were acting to bring the African awareness on American people. Okay, so they needed to travel to Africa. You know, and those people were put in a situation to don't be able to try to travel in Africa because they've been portrayed and labelized and desirable in Africa. This is a way to regulate the flux of people. And if you see how today, when you come to when you come as African, when you come live to Europe, most of the laws stop you from moving, unless you drop down your citizenship and take the own. You can't move. I remember my first year in Italy was like every year you need to have a permit to stay, but that permit has a 1 year validity. Okay, so but every time I want to renew it, you need to pay for it. But after you renew it, they don't give it to you straight away. They wait until it's come out 5 days before it actually goes down. Is that one they give you to it? So they give you to it just you have the time to renew one. But at the time you are regular, but you are not.
Yeah,
because you are regular, you accept to be in a country, but you can't move. You can't just move in the country. You can't go abroad. You can't travel abroad. And that was the situation of millions of people living in Italy. Yeah. I know that it's the same people living in France.
You wouldn't get a job. You wouldn't be employed.
You can't be a job. You can't be employed. Yeah. You can't be.
And you're put in a situation of stress as well.
Exactly. And but when you go down, deep down, you see what the kind of people, what kind of job people actually do here. It's the most time people are doing the same kind of job people are doing under slavery.
And it's interesting as well, because just to add to it, I think there was one point we mentioned earlier on, which was that at the time the Code Noir forbade the black slaves to have any other religion than the Roman Catholic religion.
Only the Roman Catholic religion.
So you could not have any connection with your ancestral way of life. You could only have the Roman Catholic religion. Yeah,
that thing. Why you say it's very important to say that you can't not have any other religion apart from the Catholic Roman Catholic Church. Okay. Someone will think, okay, you can be Protestant, you can be maybe no. Specifically why they say you can't belong to a traditional religion.
Yes, that's
you can't do that. It's not about because for you to be Protestant, they need to bring it to you. Okay.
We're talking about the 16th, 17th century here. So yes, the Protestant faith was already existed, but it wasn't prevalent. It wasn't really well known at the time. Therefore, it was really uncommon to have many Protestants anyways. Therefore, the only religion in Christianity, or the only religion who believed in Christ, was the Roman Catholic religion.
The Catholic Church.
That was,
because the Roman Catholic Church have a straight, this is where we're going right now, a straight connection with the monarchy. We know that the monarchy in Europe, okay, the first son of the monarch gonna be is meant to become the king, but the second born is to become a Monseigneur. So there was that connection. That makes sense because the two represent the same spirit of the enslavement. So it makes only sense when you say that you can only be member of the Roman Catholic Church, because the Roman Catholic Church represents the monarchy. You know, we talk about French monarchy, Italian monarchy, German one, they're all family. the whole family. And this is what I want us to move in. We have been taught in Africa that after colonization, the colonization will become a democratic state. So the points, the central points or the central pillar of democratic state is you having a government, having a president, having a senate and a parliament. All than a bit, all than a moment. But all those instruments and tools was existing already into the monarchy. Yes.
Before we move on to the monarchy, I think I just wanted to, I was looking at the Code Noir, and then I was looking at some of the prohibition, and then I thought it would be quite good to discuss. So for example, there's one that says here that wedding between slaves was strictly required the master's permission. So slaves could not marry as they wanted. They had to get the master's permission. And then the slave's own consent. So if the master consents, the slave consents as well. So then children born between married slaves were also slaved. And then but then they belonged to the female slave's master. So now children born between a male slave and a free woman are free because they belong to the mother. Children born from a female slave and a free man were slaves. Now you might think like, oh, that's fair enough, but one thing we're not understanding here is the fact of like, it was harder for the women to be freed compared to the men. And also what they used to do was like the female slaves were the slaves, it was easier as well to capture the female slave because the women
have less resistance.
Less resistant, and then also you could get them when they're pregnant or whatever, you could really capture them. Now what they did was they would capture loads of women and they would keep them, and then they would have a manding, which is the guy mandingo. So that's the guy that they would pay in order to
free man.
He can now come, so he can either be a free man that they rent out, that can come now to have children with all these women, because once the women have the children, they now belong to the master. Therefore, and then you have a manding that goes on to go to so many women, and just to kind of like make sure that they can become pregnant and have children. But then also that thing about like the men can run away. Therefore, even if a man became free, or even if a man earned freedom, that was just for him. It doesn't change anything because the woman is still a slave. And then because she was a slave, she was the one that kept the children. If you look today in the African society, the black world today, what you will see is you will see the men in prison and then the women in a bigger captivity. Because they don't have the freedom of thinking. They're either stuck between the religions that we mentioned, as in like the Christian religion, they're stuck in the Christian religion, and then they're the ones that have the children, so that the children cannot inherit of the free mentality of the men.
Yeah, exactly.
So another thing it says here as well was like slaves belonging to different masters must not gather at any time under any circumstances. We not even have permission here or anything like that.
No.
So then that is very important because, and this is why the Code Noir becomes relevant, is that it is difficult for someone who comes from Congo Kinshasa to go into Congo Brazzaville, from the Belgian Congo to the French Congo. It's difficult for them to go through these two countries. It's even better for them to come to Europe and then go back to those countries, although technically they could swim from one country to the other. Technically they could cross the barrier walking, right? It's the same everywhere you go in Africa. If you're trying to send things from one African country to the other, it's impossible. Why? Because slaves should not congregate if they belong to different masters. Slaves of different masters are forbidden to congregate. And that's something that when you see and you understand that most African or black movement that has been and that has had the power of congregating many people, Martin Luther King, and you can see Malcolm X, all of those were killed because of that part of the law, because they made people congregate, and that was forbidden. And that's the funny thing, still until today, because the funny thing is you will be asking yourself, who's the master here? Look at your passport. Go into the stock exchange and find out to which entity your passport is registered to, and that's the entity you belong to. And anyone who belongs to a different master, in that case, you will be forbidden to segregate, to have marriage, to be in a relationship even, and you will have issues up until today. And the funny thing is, it's very difficult to perceive and understand what I say, but the people who find themselves in that situation, as they hear me, they understand why they are in the situation that they are even today.
That go on anti-immigration. When you look into immigration, you're gonna see that people from the Republic Democratic of Congo, most of them are in Belgium. Republic Congo d'Ivoire, Senegal, Togo, Benin, they are in France. Kenya, South Africa, Zimbabwe are in UK. Angola are in Portugal. So you have that direct link from master, that relationship, and this is what I want us to get into, to go down. When we talk about the democratic system, the democratic system, democratic government in Africa are failing apart. No one is saying that because first of all they are corporation. Okay, so they are registered corporation into the stock market in the USA. The question I'm asking, if they are corporation, who registered them?
Who registered them?
You need to have the owner to register a company. You need to have your own company and go. It's not the employee. They are not the employee that go to register a company. So if a country, and all the African countries are registered in the stock market, okay, our birth certificate, we only have the copy, the original are taken by someone. This person is the owner. So any money make into the country, we see now in Congo people dying every day. Death is business today. When we're crying, our people are dying. Someone else, people are making money because they have assurance life and countries. 20 years ago, 40 years ago, what they did, they put assurance life and people in that country, and they put big money on those assurance. But 20 years after, they're gonna break the situation down to have a war, mass killing. Any people that die into that situation is money that people are getting. We need to understand this situation very well. Our country, our corporation, is corporation that they need to have assurance and serious on people's life. That means that when you die, someone get the money for it. And if your country has been in peace for 40 years, and all of a sudden you break into a situation of war, and people start dying, someone is getting the money for that killing. People are get paid for that. And those people who are there, we fail to understand what happened in the 1884, 1885, the Berlin Conference. Who were in the table of that conference? Monarch, royalty, who decide to size Africa and keep it for them. And then they bring a system of democracy, which I was introducing before. When I talk about, you have a governor, you have a minister, you have a president. Well, minister all have existed into empire. The minister, those are the administrator. They administrate the country on the behalf of the king or the queen. We always have parliament. Those are the speaker who speak for the people. When you look into the movie where we say kings and queens, you always have the big door open and people come from a region. We have suffering this. Those are the parliament. Now, the minister belong to the royal families normally. Okay. Now, when they sitting, when they have a meeting, a conference, they ask someone who precedes that meeting, and this is the president. So now we have get into the thinking that the president is the president of the people. No, the president is the president of the governed only when in the sitting. They need a president for the sitting, but the president is not the president of the people. The president of the state is the state is institution. In the United States, you have a president. Trump is the president. He precedes the activity of the government. But they have a queen. The England queen. The same in Canada. When you say the Ghana, you see it's more obvious. You see the money. They still have the queen. So you may for me more. You've been talking about research you made in Europe. You see that all the small countries in Europe have a sovereign. Yeah.
No, absolutely, and it's funny because when you look into the Cold War, you can understand that many problems that we face today, especially post-colonial Africa, the answers were in the Cold War because it was clear as day. Because here they say something like, freed slaves were French subjects, even if they were born elsewhere. What does that mean? It means that whether you were born in Congo, in Ghana, in Cote d'Ivoire, Ivory Coast, or any place, Benin, right? The moment you were freed, you became a French subject, and you're thinking like, oh, a French subject, so you were French, you took French nationality. No, freed slaves had the same right as French colonial subjects. So you had the same right as a colonial subject. So meaning that colonialism was a continuation of slavery, meaning that a freed slave was directly pushed into you had the same right as a colonial person, which were very little rights in France. Absolutely very little rights. But then what they say here is like, but then you were a French subject, meaning that although you were French and you were no longer Ghanaian, Congolese, or from Benin or from Ivory Coast, so you were no longer from these places, you were French, but you had no right, you had the same right as a colonial rights. So then it's a case of, yes, you were freed, but you were still a subject within a subject, because you were not able to go back to where you came from. You couldn't go back to claim where you existed. You couldn't go back to claim your ancestrality, and that's why it's important. Like I mentioned one time, it was an eye opener for me, because one day I was looking at a what you call a magazine, and in the magazine they talked about the most eligible bachelors. They call it the real princes, the real Prince Charming, and in Europe, the real Prince Charming in Europe, something like that. So it was a tabloid magazine. So I was looking in the magazine, and it shocked me because what I found was very striking, and I think it was the day where I realized that, wow, we have been seeing a different reality than the reality out there. Now there was about 30 princes that they were showing. And I tell you, all those princes came from Europe, and it did not come from one country. It was for different countries in Europe. Even countries where I thought there was no monarchy, because we knew about their prince, we knew about we knew about the president, we knew about the prime ministers, but I realized that day that they had princes and they had their queens as well, and kings. Now, it started with things like the UK, and then it was Iceland, and then there was Belgium, there was Germany, and then there was France. I was like, okay, I know about it. And then there was Spain, and then there was Portugal, and then there was other countries, and there was all these other countries. So then the reality was that Austria, you name them, we have been sold a fake idea of democracy, or we have been understanding a fake idea of democracy. Is that case of do as I say, not as I do? Because if you do as I do, you will see that their democracy exists side on with their monarchy.
Exactly. That's where I want us to go now. So what we're trying to do here is to make peace in mind that democracy doesn't exist is a lie. Okay? The system where we have been presented as democracy, okay, include monarchy as well. Okay, but the thing is that the African, the Kamit, the Kush, and the Kemetic monarchy has been destroyed and replaced by the Occidental monarchy. As we have been saying since the beginning, the law that regulate the life of people in most the African country and places have been written, emanated by those royal. The African monarchy, when we look into Rome, to make an example, I'm gonna talk about Rome because they have been famous in conquering other states. When Rome has conquered, when a state has been conquered by Rome, the monarch and the royal family exiled or killed. Okay, the country kind of become a Roman colony, and the people, but the people become subjects of the Roman emperor on the Roman throne, but don't have the Roman identity. It's like the same situation we have in Africa. For example, Congolese people for the DRC are subjects of the Belgian kingdom, but they don't have the Belgian identity. Those like Togo, Benin, Senegal are subject of the French crown, but they don't have the French identity. You don't have the right as French. This relationship gives those royal the power to register the country as company into the stock market and to live on them. Everyone's died. They put bet on people, on people's life. They put assurance on people's life. Everything, any event happening makes money for them. Whether you have a car crash, whether it is a wedding, whatever it is, makes money on their pocket because they bet on it. You know, like you see when you see the animal, the dog grassing, the same thing. They are bets on this kind of section of life. All of this is happening because the African monarch has been put under unemployment. As long as we're gonna stay in the situation where we don't have the royal, we can't win this battle with government. The government belongs to them. To have a true African government and public administration, they need to be put in charge by African royalty. That's where the focus of this discussion is. We need to understand we have been told a lie. Our country are not democratic country, they are corporation.
Yes, yes.
And as people, we are subject to the Occidental kingdom and realm and empire. And the relationship, we can prove it. You can see it every day when you look around yourself.
You can see it.
You can see it. Unless you decide to don't see it, to close your eyes, but you see it every day. And we see people as combatants fighting every day, fighting against the politician in Africa. You fighting against, you like Don Quixote.
What are you fighting for?
Uh-huh.
Who are you fighting against? And what are you fighting to bring? That's the question. Because the problem is, like you're saying, I love the fact that you said you're fighting against a thing that you cannot see. You're fighting for something that you do not understand or you cannot actually potentially bring because you don't even know what's going on right now. Because it's funny, because when you look at, like, it's very important for everyone to really do their research well. Like when you look in Europe, you will see that they will tell you such and such country officially are ruled by the royals. They will tell you there's a small handful of countries who have their royals in today, and then the other do not. But when you look closely, Italy is a good example where, yes, it's the prime minister that rules the country and they even have a president, but the royal family is still there. Portugal is a good example. In Spain, officially it is a royal family, but in Portugal, officially it's not a royal family, but the royal family lineage is still known, is still respected.
as it is, even in France, whatever
Monaco,
you,
you have Monaco.
You have Monaco. You still have all. You have Japan. You have China. You have Philippines. Everywhere you go, those who seem to don't have one, as America, as Canada, as Australia, because they are under the British Empire, the Commonwealth, because they have the Queen. Any country that thrives, every country that progresses, because they have the monarchy. And all the countries in the world have monarchy. The only monarchy that has been destroyed and segregated are the African monarchy.
The African ones. But we'll still say Duat for the few, because there is a few.
Yeah, we need to recognize a few.
Swaziland, we have the King Swatid from Swaziland that's still in effect today, and we have also Tonga, King Tupo as well, which is very important because the thing is, yes, there are very few, but there is still some. In terms of, when I was looking through, I could see that there was still some kings available. In Noshoto, we have King Letsi III, and you know, these are just some of the few there. And in Nigeria is a great example because they're doing a reconstruction of their royal family, and not even just the royal families, but they have a deeper understanding of the royal ruling, and then the family, as in the Nigerian empire was constructed in the sense where you have the monarchy, but you also had other rulers within the countries as well. So you had the local kings, and then you had the regional kings, as well as having the larger kings as well. So they have reconstructed that system, and it makes them the strong country that they are today, because they've been able to stand against the aggression that they've received, mainly because of the way that their system responds to a certain extent to the need of the people. But then the thing is, more needs to be done. But this is a great example of how they're trying very hard to reconstruct that system. And then Nigeria is not the only case, because in many other cases we know the names of the royals available in Kama. We know the names, and we know those families. They are families who date back from the antiquities of the African. And I think it's important to understand, because what it means is that it is a link towards the ancient culture. It is a link between, you have not only the ancient culture, but you also have the traditions, and you also have the ways of the people as well. And that's what it represents. It represents the way of the people that came before us. And I think it's very important to understand this, and it's something that we should not take lightly, as it is something that we need to understand. It's something we need to study very thoroughly as well, because the job of the kings and queen, and that's why in Europe, although many countries have discarded the kingship ruling, but they will maintain that link with the history, because that link with the history is very, very important. And it's something that Africa, although has lost, and although many of the kings and queens were killed, or they were deportated from Africa, or they were taken away, or it was very diluted, but the point is the descendants is here, the descendants is there, and that information is here, and information is here now.
Yeah, absolutely. I wanted in the French emission we did a talk about some positive example, and luckily, unfortunately, I tried to mention what we're saying here to the French version of our war. So we have been talking about what kingdom again?
So in Africa, I talked about the kingdom of Lushoto.
Lushoto
where
kingdom.
This king, let's say, that's in power just now. There's the kingdom of Swaziland, and there's also the kingdom of Tonga.
I heard that
in Nigeria, there are many kings.
In Switzerland, well. They even decided lastly to change the name from Switzerland to the original African name.
Okay.
Yeah. So Switzerland. So those are the positive example, and I'm answering to my brother and elder Ndine Balemba Kubwanu who wrote me about what I give some example who were not right, and I will agree with him right now, because when we look to the positive example from our point of view, from what we're standing, and those are the positive example. As I say, I want to repeat it here, the 1960 experiment of the African states are coming to an end. As corporation, they are failing, that all of them failing. The Congo DRC is falling apart. You know, the Rwanda, even though they try to give that picture of something going very well, is not. Okay, because Kabwana was not very happy because I talk about the Rwanda as positive example. So I want to rectify that. What I say about positive example, they've been doing something in the sense of giving more dignity, okay, in the people. But as experiment on the 60, all the state are failing. So now we need to look back to the whole, and then we have a very good example. We have Queen Diambi and Kabatuzwila. I was amazed to discover that actually we still have a queen. We have many queens and kings in Congo, but Queen Diambi Kabatuzwila is very active in the Afro-Caribbean community, traveling across. Travel to Nigeria. We have a lot of video from trying to visit.
South America, she has been
elected.
She's
elected.
Known as Queen of the Afro descendants in South America.
In Brazil. In Brazil. So he traveled a lot. He traveled to Nigeria, to different countries to meet other kings and queens. So this is a very good example, and this is also at the same time a very big opportunity. We have the opportunity to fight, to win the fight without actually fighting. Absolutely. This is the way of our ancestors, because I want here to remember you that the African people, the Kush Kamit Kongo people, are the only one who never invaded anyone in the world. No time, nowhere we leave our place to go to someone else's place to fight him in order to get his belonging and to get his country and his people. We never do that. Our ancestors traveled long time ago before other people start traveling. But whenever we go, if people were living there, we just go somewhere else. We need to recognize we are the most peaceful. The only, I will say, one of the most peaceful in this earth.
Because there are many peaceful people that have continued to lead themselves in their peaceful way. And I do think, although the world gives us this idea of globalization, where everything has been conquered, where there's like cash machines everywhere, there's tall buildings in all over the surface of the world. The reality is, it's not. Not all surface of the world has been visited by the modern men, thankfully. Therefore, there are many people who still fight, like you're saying, peacefully to maintain their way of being. And I do think it's important, and I do think it's very important to point it out, because in so many cases a war doesn't need to be verbal, where we insult people or physically, where we fight against something.
This is wrong. This is against my heart.
It's in creating something.
You can't fight a disease with another disease.
Absolutely not.
You know, you can't cast away the darkness, bringing more darkness. You know,
and I wanted to add as well, yes, the new name of Swaziland is Eswatini.
Eswatini, yeah, I heard about that.
So yes, it's a good positive way, because many things have changed. Many countries are going to change the names back to the original one, and also creating this strong movement as well. And I do think Ghana is a good example of where it's one of the few countries that have opened the doors and actually invited back all its children, so all the children of Africa, to come back as they please, meaning that all the children who were deportated from Africa are able to go to Ghana now and actually be accepted, and then take traditional names and also be part of the traditional way of life in Ghana as well. And that is a very, very positive example of the changes that are here.
The changing that is happening.
Yes, the changes that are here already.
I want to close, getting to close this presentation. I want to remind one more thing. We can fight, we can win this fight without fighting, without bringing destruction, without killing, without insulting, without destroying. We are the people of peace, and my heart guarantee victory. My heart guarantee victory over the people who live into my heart. We don't need to kill people. We don't need to cast away people. We just need to bring our kingship back into their place of power. A king title can't be removed if it's for life. But for a king or queen to be able to act, he needs the support of his people.
Absolutely.
Today we have kings and queens, but they don't have support. Most of them don't even know themselves. Positive example would be like in talking for the Congo people. The kingdom of Congo is the one of the big kingdom in the world today. People think that the kingdom of Congo is dead. No, it never died. Because whenever the subject of this kingdom exists, the kingdom still exists. The kingdom is not the king, it's not the queen, it's the people, the subjects. And today, the Congo people are all across the world. From Africa, Kama, to West, to the South America, to other lands. The Congo kingdom is today is one of the biggest. And we need to bring up that spirit of the Congo subject being of the Congo kingdom. We need to get ourselves a subject of the Congo Empire. I'm a subject of the Congo Empire. Who are you?
You want a chair?
I'm the subject of Congo Empire. Who are you? Are you a subject of Congo Empire? My invitation is to close and to pass back the word to Masenet is a call to the people who have royal title in their family to claim it. We need those people to act in. Prince, marquis, counts, all those people who have royal title. Don't be afraid of that. People are afraid of those title according to the knowledge of it disclaimed by the colonizer. They want us to be afraid of it, so they can always control. Because they know if a royal stand up and people come after him, they have no claim. They have to back off. Today we're fighting a war like where is this Kabila or Tshisekedi. But if we have a claim, we have a queen standing or a king standing, and we as people we standing behind him. The royal family of Europe, they're gonna find themselves in the position to back off. But if we don't do that, we just in the business of going from president to president, then we're still in the game.
Yeah. Absolutely. And I think it's a case also of understanding that you have to look at Europe today and then seeing that they've been able to find the right balance between having the royals and having a government, and the government has its own purpose to do, and then you have the separation of powers. You have the ruling, and you have the executioners, and then you have all these different powers used to make sure that laws are respected, to make sure that the way of life is protected, because laws are literally enacted to protect the way of life, and that's all they are. Now, an interesting point that we mentioned as well is like when it comes to titles, for example, and I think we mentioned it on the French when we did the French one and not the English one yet. Before we close, just to mention quickly that a few years ago I got to learn that, for example, there was a monarch. She wasn't really part of the royal family per se, but there was a woman in Spain that had the most. She was the most titled individual within the Europe cycles. Therefore, when the Queen of UK, or when the Queen Elizabeth of UK went to Spain, she was the only person she could kneel to, because she had the highest title, even to her as well. Therefore, it meant that in the case of when there was a discussion, you would give respect to that individual. Although you were a ruler representing an entire country, here was this individual who not only owned half of Spain, or if not most of Spain, but she was also someone that has more title than the queen of a country entirely, or the queen of the Commonwealth, if you can call her that. Therefore, that makes that kind of like, when you take information like that, it makes you take a step back and actually understand this. So then, when your country elects a president, and this president has to face a monarch in that manner, do not forget that a queen of an entire country had less title than an individual that wasn't even the ruling member of the royal family, because she was connected to the royal family, but she wasn't a ruling member of the royal family. But she had the most title, even to her own royal family, possibly as well. Because if Queen Elizabeth, if she had more than Queen Elizabeth, that meant that she had more title than the royal family at the time as well, within her own country. Now imagine a president or a minister just like this, that was elected and voted just like this, and then he was in presence of that individual. Now the problem is, so long as you're not representing a higher monarchy in terms of a higher ranking individual, you have to respect them. So you become almost like a subject, just like those laws said. You become a French subject, you become a British subject. Although you have colonial rights, but you become a subject to that individual, especially because you have the colonial rights. And that's what we have as an issue today, and that's why Africa is being bleeded to death, simply because Africa has lost the individual that has all the titles. They have lost the custodial individuals, because you have to understand, the point is custodial. It's not necessarily that they have to be the one in the parliament, or they have to be the one making the laws. No, they're custodial of those ancestral titles and ancestral achievements, if you call it like that as well, in modern terms. Now when you don't have that, automatically you become under someone else. So now, just to say, if you take a president, when you look at Mobutu, for example, for Congo, that's the only time where we had a president that could actually stand next, close to close with European monarchy. Why? Because with Mobutu, he created a kind of empire. So by creating a kind of empire, on even as small as it was, as in the Zaire just started, and it was at its infancy when Mobutu was alive, but he created this renown. He was renowned just because he had created as a monarch. He became a monarch. He was known as a monarch, and the minute he moved away, everything reverted back to colonial titles. And this is the study that we have to do closely, to understand that study, to see where can we learn, what can we make better, and how can we create a system that respects us, that not just respects our cultures and our customs, but that provide the answers for our today problems in a way that means that we can actually move forward as a people. Do you want to share?
Do you want to share, to closing this session, I'm gonna say do you want to share to Queen Diambi Kabatuswila, do you want to share to our Hanium Fundishi, do you want to share to Baba Ero, and do you want to share to our father and to our one of our brother in London, Alpha Kwabo. Kwabo is one of his very active brother. Do you want to share to Menchuetep, do you want to share to AKN Kinshasa, do you want to share to AKN Bruxelles, and all the brother. Do you want to share to you who belong to royalty, who belong to the African monarchy, and we are waiting for you. Okay, we are waiting for you. Monarch need education. They need monarchy is not just a title. It's a title, but it's not like a prestige thing. It is a responsibility. And we want to come up with a school of thoughts and developing how a monarch, how an African monarch in the 21st century should behave. His responsibility and duty to our own there. Do an chair, do a monra, do a nep chair. We're gonna look to a system and speaking to the classic language of Kush Kamit Kongo people. We're gonna say Amasu empa emra sanksu. Amen ra empa emra. Awu kuau ra manketi pa erora.